Well, hello, I am Roy Harriman here with Strategos President Vaughn Baker, and we thank you for joining us on Facebook Live. For those of you who tried to join us last week, we apologize. Like I say, we had a ghost in the machine, but we got rid of it. We exercised it, and we're excited to have you here today. And by the way, we welcome your questions and your comments. And if you benefit from what you learn here, we would love it if you would share it with others on Facebook. Well, I am excited to talk about this topic. It's very intriguing. And we're talking about active shooter panic buttons in schools. It's a relatively new thing. And what we're talking about is a box. It looks sort of like a fire alarm. And you lift a little piece of plastic, you press the button, and it automatically calls the police in an event of an active shooter. And some teachers also have around their neck something like the equivalent of a key fob where they can press the button without even approaching the box. And I was talking with Vaughn about this offline, and it appears to be a simple solution. Press this button, all your problems go away. And we're certainly not discounting the value of it entirely. However, Vaughn, is this the solution to make schools safe and secure?
Well, when we talk about solutions, the solution is a comprehensive approach to preparedness. And, this is a piece of the puzzle to being a solution, but it's not the catch-all, end-all, where all of a sudden you activate the switch and like you said, all our problems go away and the police are going to come quicker than they normally would if 911's called. There are some pros to this particular device, so we want to talk about not only some of the pros, but also some of the cons and concerns that we need to address and if we choose to go with this type of device, and then also maybe some other features to look for when we're talking about some sort of crisis notification and some sort of duress notification.
So it sounds like there is a net gain just looking at one particular component in that you don't have to fumble around calling a 911 operator.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to talk about some of the pros. This particular solution it's got some nice features on it. For instance, it integrates with your existing mass notification solutions, whether you have a text, email, and phone call mass notification or social media notification. It also integrates with social media, and that you can even integrate with some schools have gunshot detectors, and it'll integrate with that. So if it detects a gunshot within the school with your existing system, it will automatically activate this particular blue box, and it'll also you can integrate it to activate your fire doors. If you're going to use fire doors as part of your compartmentalized lockdown solution, whether we're talking about mag locks, we can integrate it into those kind of solutions as well. But but there are some cons to it and some concerns and some things that you really want to address through either policy or training, and see if you can overcome those cons as well.
And I think this is where you're going, and that would be in the Chicago Tribune article that we referenced as we were promoting this live stream. It noted that about 20 schools in Illinois and more than 150 nationwide have implemented these active shooter panic buttons. But I want to read a piece just very short from the article where they interviewed one of the students, and the student says, "I feel a lot safer than I used to." And then it goes on to say the closest box to him during the school day is right down the hall, 2 to 3 seconds away if he's running. Are we missing anything? Should we feel a lot safer?
Well, it's interesting. I hear that phrase a lot, feel a lot safer. I guess what I want to really emphasize is there's a difference between feeling safe and actually being safe. An example I would give you is when my son was young, maybe I went into his bedroom at night and gave him a kiss goodnight and told him he'd be safe. But if I left all my doors unlocked, the reality was that he wasn't safe. So, part of this process of preparedness and response is not only making people feel safer and decreasing that anxiety, but also making them actually safer. So that was an interesting quote that I picked up out of that. this manufacturer has put a lot of thought into this device. And like I said, there's a lot of good things about it. Some concerns that we want to make sure when we integrate these kind of solutions is, one, this particular device mimics the look and feel of a fire alarm box on the wall. And those fire alarm boxes are to notify, of course, a fire, and it's actually activated the same way as well. So, we know when I was in school, and I'm not here to give any kind of confessions, but I knew people that would pull that fire alarm in order to get out of class. And if that particular thing happens with this device, where the device gets activated in a false alarm type sense, where we're actually creating normalcy bias, or we're creating expectancy bias, where we have the little boy that cried wolf syndrome, and people say, oh, it's just the active shooter alarm somebody's accidentally pulled against. So that's one concern I have, because if these things aren't monitored and trained properly. The next is, if they're located, typically these boxes get located, whether it's fire or this blue box for active shooter response, are located in what we call get out areas. And these are areas that you can't lock down, like hallways, and maybe it's a large gymnasium or a large cafeteria. You locate these devices there so that people can access them where people are likely to be. However, if we're already in a place that we can lock down, and maybe the lockout is the best solution, what's happening is people get this false sense of response where they think, if I can just get to that blue box, I can get the police here quicker than calling 911. And actually, maybe they actually leave a perfectly valid lockdown location, and maybe they've achieved not only lockout, but also lock, layer, and reinforce is what we teach. But they've actually put themselves and the people in the room in danger so they could leave the room to go get them. The article references a student that says, well, the box is only 2 to 3 seconds away. Well, how long does it take to become a victim? And especially when we talk about the Parkland, Florida, and the Santa Fe, Texas incident just this year, where both of those attackers actually activated the fire alarm to get people out of lockdown. But in this case, we're voluntarily giving up our lockdown. So that's a concern I have as well. And then the last concern I have, that both of those concerns you can train through and have policies that address it. But the last one is the color blue. Typically, I would ask people that would say, frequently is, what do you think of as far as an emergency when you see that color blue, whether it's blue strobes or just the color blue in general? What's that a universal color of? And for me, I think of that as a term for a medical response. And one of the things that we advocate for our clients is, in those high ambient noise environments, whether it's a manufacturing distribution area, those sorts of things, we advocate doing a green strobe activation, not only having a mass notification in terms of maybe an intercom announcement and alarm, but also a visual notification for the hearing impaired, as well as those people that work in high ambient noise environments. And not only that, scientifically, green is more visible than blue. It's actually 7 times more visible than red. So green, that's another reason to go with green as well when we're talking about strobes. So those are just a few of the concerns I have. I don't think any of them are not overcomable, and I think the manufacturer has a quality solution here. It's just something we need to address in training.
Yes, and I did also think of your high school prankster as we were preparing for this discussion, the person who pulls the fire alarm. And I don't know how that can be overcome. We can't get students to stop posting quote unquote jokes about going to shoot up the school on Facebook. It seems nearly impossible to stop people from just pressing a button, not even necessarily get out of school, but just for the sheer joy of causing chaos. I suppose, what would you have to have cameras pointed at the devices at all times to deter people from doing something like that?
Well, absolutely. And this device has just very similar to a fire activation. They have a glass. You have to break the glass in order to get the device activated. So it delays a little bit, but putting cameras on it, that's all that's going to be used for is post-incident investigation. It doesn't eliminate what's just occurred, and that's creating a false alarm, which in turn, it creates that normalcy or that expectancy bias if it happens too frequently. And that's something that's very difficult to overcome once it occurs. So why do we have a solution? Maybe would be the question, that we have to overcome that kind of possibility, would be my question.
Yes. And by the way, if you're just joining us, we welcome any comments or questions that you have. If you are benefiting from this, we would love it if you would share it. And our topic is active shooter panic buttons. What can they do? What can they not do? So, Bon, when reading the articles, a bit of the optimism, I feel safer, this button is nearby. It sounds like this is part of the ongoing education challenge that you face, in that people's focus on an intruder is, how do I get the police here? And of course, we want the police to come. But if I've heard you say many, many, many times, in the 4 to 10 minutes that it takes police to arrive, an incredible amount of damage can happen.
Sure.
So it seems like this is, as you mentioned, this is an excellent part of the solution, if we can keep people from taking advantage of it to cause mayhem. Is this part of that overall challenge, again, that people need to understand that they have to survive until the police get there, and they need to be prepared for that 4 to 10 minutes?
Absolutely. And the two things that we address in this, an example we give is, even calling 911 doesn't make you safer. This button by itself does not make you safer. Sure, it gets law enforcement on the way. However, we tell people the rule of thumb is, get yourself safe first, and then we notify the proper people. One of the examples I give is a female that was in the Von Mar store in Omaha, Nebraska several years ago. She called 911, and automatically, as soon as she was talking to a dispatcher, she felt safe. And in our dispatcher class, where we're training dispatchers and 911 call takers, we actually tell people, hey, get yourself safe first and then call 911, because we let them listen to that 911 call, where you will hear that female's homicide take place on her 911 call, and you can almost hear her verbally let her guard down because she was talking 911. She thought she was safer. These type of devices could create that same thing. So we say, get yourself safe first and then make that sort of activation. The other things to think about when we talk about the features on these types of duress alarms or active shooter alarms is, hey, let's see if there's some wireless solutions or a wireless option too, that maybe teachers and administrators can keep on their person. That way they could activate the device wirelessly from a lockdown location versus having to get to a static or a stationary location in order to activate those sort of notification systems as well.
That's right. It goes back to the point of locking, layering, reinforcing, or getting out of the building, whatever the appropriate tactic is. And whereas, so it sounds like the panic button, it's a nice feature to have, but we can't oversell it. I wanted to draw attention to a comment here that we can address, Vaughn, from Stephen Andrew. And it sounds like he's basically agreeing with what you've shared so far. A panic button should be step one in a multiple site plan to survive and fight back if necessary.
Yeah, great comment, Steve. And yeah, so again, we talk about that principle, get yourself safe, and we use that panic button or mass notification activation system to get armed good guys on the way.
Another topic, another point in this discussion is, when we're talking about security, we always, for the most part, have to talk to some degree, at least, about spending money, though there are certainly things that can be done for free, such as, watching the parking lot and things like that. So we have to spend our resources wisely, because no one has unlimited resources. So one of the points in the Tribune article, one of the schools that they covered that had implemented these active shooter panic buttons was the system cost them about $90,000 for the one school. And it was a large school, and it was fairly sprawling, but it was still $90,000. When we're talking about spending money, would something like this, and again, we're not at all disparaging the boxes or what they do, but how can you prioritize how to spend your money when it comes to safety security? Should something like this be at the top, or are there other things that cost less that should be done first?
One of the things that we've said for years, when we talk about, we've been training law enforcement and tactical officers and special operations guys in the military for years, and there's a lot of gear out there that's cool and guys want it, and it's a lot of money. but that gear by itself does not make you safer. It doesn't make you a better operator. So a phrase we came up with to kind of put that in perspective is we're talking about where hardware meets software. Hardware is these technological solutions that do have a place, and they do provide a useful solution for a piece of the puzzle, but the software is the training. A piece of computer hardware without the right software is not going to be very effective, and the reverse of that is also true. Training without the right physical security hardware is not going to be effective either. So we got to have this balance. If it's great if you're in a situation at your school where you have a tremendous amount of fiscal resources. Hey, let's do as much as we can to prepare for this unlikely but high impact event. However, if fiscal resources are limited, let's prioritize how we're going to use those funds and maybe put some weight on what is the low hanging fruit and areas that we can take the biggest steps forward on our journey to safety and security.
Right, and one of the things that we've talked about before have been the reinforcement tools, such as the Barracuda, the value you can get out of that. In fact, we shared on our Facebook page about a church, not an organization with a lot of resources, that actually bought a reinforcement tool for every door in the Lincoln, Nebraska school district, and I don't think it cost $90,000.
No, it probably costs a lot more than that when we're talking about physical security. And it goes, again, those are purpose-designed devices to achieve lockdown. And the criteria we have for how to select the right lockdown device, purpose-designed device, is 1, it has to be installed quickly. 2, it needs to be installed with gross motor skills only, because under duress and the crisis occurs, fine motor skills are going to go away. And then 3, what challenges do we have to overcome in terms of fire code ordinances and statutes that are in your jurisdiction that we need to select the right device that our local fire folks will buy into. Excellent.
A question here from Guy Beveridge of Strategos. And he says, do the companies that sell the panic buttons typically provide training to the teachers? Now, I don't know the answer to that question, and maybe none of us do. So we won't pretend if we don't know the answer, Guy.
I would be very surprised if they did not provide training. Let's put it that way. A device like that wouldn't be very useful without training. However, when we talk about substitute teachers and new hires, did they get that training would be my question. And is there a program in place to address that situation, or non-certified staff, not just teachers themselves, but non-certified staff that may need to use those devices as well?
And again, also, you would expect that training would occur on how to use the device, of course.
Sure.
But there's a whole realm of expertise in other training, such as locking out, getting out, taking out, understanding behavior. And I'm going to be pretty sure that they can't provide all of those services, because it takes years and years to develop competency in those skills, something that Strategos teaches.
Sure, I would agree with that.
So we've talked about, to summarize, this is a good advice. This device is a helpful feature, but you have to prioritize your resources and also understand that calling the police is part of the solution. The more efficiently you can do that, the better. But there is going to be a 4 to 10 minute lag from the time that police are notified till the time they can get in the building. And of course, depending on the size of the building, it could take even longer to get from one end to the other and find where the trouble actually is. What would you say are 2 or 3 of the most important things that schools can do to keep out intruders?
Well, first of all, I would say have a plan. And that plan just can't be something we've discussed. It has to be in writing. I had an organization one time says, well, we had a plan, but we don't put it in writing because that means we have to follow it. Well, you got me there, because, yeah, if you do have a plan, you should follow it in principle anyway. Remember, plans and policies and guidelines are meant as rules of thumb. They're not meant as absolutes. There's always an exception to rules, and we got to use common sense when we're talking about that. So that would be my first thing, along with a risk assessment, doing some sort of an assessment on your building from a physical security point of view. for not that is specific to the threat that you're trying to prepare for. There's all kinds of all hazards assessments that can be done in 31 different categories, and lighting, landscaping, and do surveys of that nature and all kinds of stuff. But if you're wanting an assessment specific to this intruder response topic, where we're going to look at not only visitor management processes and systems, we're going to look at, as far as check-in, check-out, we're going to look at access control. We're going to look at, are your existing policies even being followed, whether we're talking about staff that are being stationed in the hallways on break periods to monitor activities taking place out there. And so that would be another portion of that first phase. The second phase that I would look at is the training piece. And the training piece is where we're going to come in and train all staff. Anybody who's there when the event happens needs to be trained. And we're not saying that so we can rack up the numbers. We're saying that because everybody that's there, when you're talking about certified, non-certified staff, they need to know what to do in their particular environment for their particular situation, depending on where they find themselves when the crisis occurs. And the way we achieve that is through training them. They just can't wait for a supervisor or administrator to tell them what to do, because there's going to be a lot of time that goes by and maybe the administrator can't even get to a intercom to let them know what to do. And by that time, it's too late. And then the third part is we got to exercise, or we got to drill our plans and test our training and see how people do in a reasonable simulation of the real thing. So those are the three areas that we really advocate when we're talking about schools and how they can take that next step forward.
Excellent. And you just answered a question from Danny. Do you recommend intruder safety drills for the students? And absolutely. But let me follow up on his question. How often should students participate in intruder response drills? Well,
there's two types of drills that get done. There's one that we do, and I would call these more scenario-based drills, and that's where we really try to create a simulation of the real thing. We do 3 or 4 of them when we do the training course. It's part 3 of that course. That's the first drill. We don't advocate teaching students ahead of time, however. And the reason is, when we talk about the 3-out approach, lockout, get out, takeout is fighting back. Well, young people whose minds aren't fully developed yet, what we've seen is they will implement the takeout approach or the fight back approach not as a last resort or your only resort, but as a first resort, because they don't understand this concept of mortality yet. And we give the example of, if you look at the X Games, the extreme games that are on ESPN, the ages of the people that are doing backflips on motorcycles and skateboards and everything else are typically younger, because they don't really understand the concept of mortality. I know as I've gotten older, those things that I did when I was younger, I would never dream of doing now. So that's why we don't advocate teaching kids ahead of time. We do advocate rehearsing what you're going to tell kids ahead of time, so you can direct them what to do. And as we know, in the absence of direction, they're going to self-direct in a crisis. So in self-direction in a crisis usually looks like panic and chaos. So we want to educate and rehearse what we're going to tell them. Then the other type of drill we look at is a supervised drill. And that is what takes place. It's a pre-planned drill that you actually will hand a script, and we do this with schools all the time, script to the administrator where they're going to give their announcement. You are going to tell people ahead of time that the drill is going to take place this day. The reason for that is, if we have people that are on site that may be armed, maybe it's a permissive environment, not a non-permissive environment for weapons, and you have carry and concealed weapon holders and they don't know about this drill, you could have a tragedy that takes place where you have a well-intentioned good guy that's acting like a bad guy during the drill becomes a victim because we didn't do that in an intelligent and strategic way. So there's just a lot to think about when we talk about doing these drills.
No, excellent points. The 3 options that you mentioned in terms of just the fundamentals of school security, assess, train, and drill. In your experience, what percentage of schools are doing that?
Most schools have a plan for lockdown, and but we have seen that not the majority of schools by far. I don't have any exact data, but by far not the majority of schools. They don't have a plan to do for lockdown failure, or they don't have a written plan on intruder response specifically. So we really recommend that you put that plan in writing, and I would put risk assessment and planning, that written plan, in that first phase, both of them in that first phase.
Excellent thoughts. An intriguing idea, an active shooter panic button. That sounds like the bottom line here is it's not a panacea. It's not a button that makes bad guys go away or problems go away. It doesn't eliminate the need for training and assessing risk as well as drilling.
Absolutely. And I want to emphasize, I think this is a good solution if it's implemented in the right context and it's associated with training. This particular solution we've been talking about, there's a lot of different ones out there that do many of the same things. I don't want to say that I'm down on this system specifically. I just say I had some concerns that I wanted to make sure that before schools implemented this solution that they were able to address as they did that.
Excellent. I have one last comment here from Steve. And Steve, I don't want to mangle the pronunciation of your last name, so I'm just going to say Steve. But Steve asks, any ideas on how to motivate schools to get quality training and out of the complacency zone? So if there are some schools that are complacent or just don't know what to do, say particularly if you're on the outside, you're a parent, a member of the citizen of the school district, how can you proactively encourage a school district without causing defensiveness possibly?
Yeah, and that's I wish I had the magic answer to that question, because there's a lot of schools that struggle with this. But the one that I've seen be the most successful the most frequently is getting parents to motivate schools. That's where you tend to get the not only the quickest, but the most effective response. If you got administrators that are getting calls from parents wanting to know how they're keeping their kids safe, their most protected asset, they tend to be very responsive and to eliminate or at least reduce that anxiety and that fear that parent has on that particular topic. So if you can get your parents involved, if they feel like there's maybe not a good solution in place for a particular school or school district, then that might be a good way to do it. And it has been a good way from what I've seen.
Excellent. We certainly appreciate all the comments and questions. We weren't able to address all of them, which is a wonderful problem to have. Vaughn, any other thoughts on these topics here? This has been a really fruitful discussion, I think.
No, absolutely. And again, any solution, no matter what crisis you're preparing for, where somebody's presented this is all you need, I would be leery of that because very rarely is it a one-stop magic shop where one magic pill will give you the solution for that particular crisis. It's usually a comprehensive approach is what we're talking about here. So I just want to say, hey, that's how you can determine whether or not you can see out of the gate if this is a good solution or not. So I want to thank everybody that took the time out of their day to attend the Facebook Live show today as well.
We appreciate it. It's a privilege to be able to share information with you. Thank you for joining us. If you've benefited from it, we would love it if you'd share it. And you can learn more about Strategos at the website on our screen, strategosintl.com. And we would love to be of service for you, whether you need your facility assessed, whether you need training, or you just need a consultation for whether it's a business, a school, or a church, or even a large event that you're managing. So thank you again for joining us, and we'll be reposting. And we, again, appreciate you joining us. So have a wonderful and safe week. Thank you, Vaughn.
Thank you.